when we met on Tuesday, we started to talk about your introduction. Yay! And we started to talk about the different elements that your introduction should have. If you're on that paper or the handout to follow along, we went over the 4 different criteria that you are going to need to have in your introduction. Whether you are writing a speech for this class or a speech for another class, these same pieces will be incorporated. Potentially a little bit differently depending upon the level, again, the audience, what they know, what you know, but these 4 parts are always going to be incorporated. The introduction has 4 pieces. You will always start every introduction with a, great job everybody, here we go. There, check it, nailed it, attention getter. So we have this attention getter, right? And in our last class, we went over these 7 different methods that one can, in fact, engage and start to gain that audience's interests. Psychologists have studied and tried to figure out what best is going to draw an audience. How can we get them to stick around? How are we going to get them to focus and listen? And there's a lot of great strategies and techniques and tips to help and assist you. We talked about a lot of these different ways, which each of you have written down, but there were 2 key parts that we spoke about that you, if you do not address in your attention getter, that you'll have to address in the next part of your speech. And those 2 things, do you remember, were the relating the topic to your audience? You remember that? Gosh, we should do that, right? So relate it to them, or in fact show the importance, right? These are great strategies and methods to use to gain your audience's interest. But if you do not do so with utilizing attention getter, we will need to make note of this throughout this introduction. All of these attention getting methods can be used, of course, independently of themselves, or as we learned last time, you can mix and match the different devices for even a more bigger bang. But the attention getter, and the most important part, is that it flows seamlessly into the next step of your introduction, which logically, if we've now arrived at the end of the attention getter's job is to get us interested in our what? Topic. Well, now we can finally tell the audience what that, in fact, topic is and how it connects to that attention getter. So the second thing we have here, like we talked about, is the reveal topic. And did we talk a bit about what goes in the reveal topic portion last time? Did this class get to that?
I think we just did the 7 different.
The 7 things, okay. Now we need to get into this reveal topic portion. If we are remembering, and I think I told you this. So these are our 4 parts. We have a credibility statement. We have our thesis and the reveal of topic. The reveal of topic and the credibility statement are our middle, or our bulk. You will always start with the attention getter, and you will always end the introduction with the thesis. But the fluidity of the revealing topic and credibility is going to be up to the writer. And it's how you set up your attention getter that's going to determine then how you reveal it, and then how you start to situate that in the context of your experience and our purpose or our well-being of the audience and those of whom we are speaking about. And I'll talk to you about what that means in the scope of credibility. But on the very basic level of the reveal topic, this would be a great way for you to, in general, tell us your topic area. And by the time we got to the end of the reveal topic, we could establish the specific purpose that we will be looking at, what specifically we will be talking about with this topic. And I'll show you a couple different ways to do that. What does the reveal topic portion also include, other than simply laying out the topic? what else? You remember from your first speech, what else, what was its job? My name's Amanda, I'm 19 years old, I go to LMU, I'm studying communication. But for you to really get to know me better, I've been talking to you all about this for quite some time now, that what we're going to need in our introduction is for you to contextualize your issue. You're going to need to tell us how it exists in the world right now. What is this issue? What's going on? So what we are going to want to do, and remember, the purpose is for us to give any background information that the audience is going to need when they get into the body of this speech. As individuals who have no clue what your speech is about, what do they need to know before you start that speech so that they can stay on board, they can stay informed, and they can follow your train of thought? That they don't have to think, oh, well, what does that mean? Or when did that come into play? Or why was that law there? How does that work? We need to start thinking historically, politically, or socially. And that's, again, going to be up to you. What type of information do you want to use to contextualize this particular topic? You are not going to need to give an entire history or an entire political landscape since the dawn of time for us. You are specifically talking about an area of this issue. And that's what we want to get you to start focusing on. And there's a very easy way to do it, in my opinion, when you align it with something called a problem statement. The problem statement is something that I gave y'all a while back at the library. It was that handout in that PowerPoint piece. And the problem statement, and let me simply pull it back here. I always, each of you had a research question, right? That was an issue. It's a problem. I don't want the word problem to get ahead of you here. All of this is sounding very persuasive. Like, oh gosh, there's a problem. We gotta throw out a problem. I'm gonna tell them that it's a problem. It is an issue. It's going on in the world. Here's something that's relevant, something that is occurring, something that is happening, and something that is causing individuals injustice. It is a problem, but we're going to tailor it for informational speaking in an effective way. When an individual writes a problem statement, and this can be done in any of the classes that you're doing, specifically if you're writing an argumentative piece, that an effective problem statement concisely and concretely should do a couple things. So put the problem in context. Start to think about these questions. What do we already know about the situation? Describe the precise issue that you are going to address. Oh, you mean the specific purpose? Yes, I do. Show the relevance of the problem. Why do we need to know it? And finally, set the objectives of the research. What will you do to find out? The last one is one that we will be saving for persuasion. But in these three, put the problem in context. What do we already know? This is what I'm saying for each of you. Can you put your issue in context? What do we already know about it? What is the state of this right now? Why, or what do we need to know about that? So in the grand scheme, here's what the world looks like. Specifically, however, this issue is going down and it's going to be addressed, and here's the state of that. And it is imperative that we start to examine this information, because why? When we do this, we can start to draw our audience to our thesis and to what we are specifically talking about, making sure that we cover our tuchus, our butts, and we have the information that is necessary to make it clear to them. But when you write a problem statement, people do it in businesses all the time. Simply like, okay, well, there's a problem. How are we going to solve this issue? Let's write a problem. But oftentimes we do it in academia. It helps us contextualize a situation. It helps us examine or look at the significance of our problem. Like, what is this issue and what's going on and why is it important? It simply makes you check yourself. The But if you can start writing about 4 sentences that contextualizes your idea, it's a really easy way for you to also be able to talk about your issue to somebody, to introduce, well, what are you researching? Oh, well, I'm doing this. And why are you doing it? Oh, yeah, because blah, 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 and this has it, and you're like, oh, my gosh, look at what they've learned. All right. When you write it well, if you want to help a problem, which we eventually are going to do, but also a clearly defined and well understood problem is crucial to finding and implementing effective solutions. We need to know that a problem in fact exists, that there is an issue. And ideally, that's why we were doing this around the library time, but we didn't get around to it. But making sure that we in fact have an issue that can be worked with, and knowing why you want to work with it and what is going to happen, and that there is in fact a potential solution will assist in knowing that it can go somewhere. But remember, we aren't going to provide those solutions for us this time. Writing the problem statement, it can be several paragraphs long. It's not going to be. A problem statement can serve as a basis for a proposal. So you can also be like, okay, I'm going to give a proposal to my instructor about this is what I'm proposing to do research on. Or a problem statement can be condensed into a few sentences in the introduction of a paper or a what? Speech, y'all! That's right! So that's what you all are going to do. I can't wait. That's so exciting. All right. All problem statements follow a similar process in writing, but they differ for things like practical versus theoretical problems. Right now, we're going to perk up. Which one do you have? Is it theoretical or is it practical? Let's look. Practical research problems. If we're doing practical research, we identify a problem by reading reports or following up on previous research. You're going to look for issues or performance, or if something is effectively working or isn't in an organization. I don't know, like the prison system or the mental health system or the treatment systems of the world, right? Okay, there we go. Processes that can be improved on, right? So I have another student who's talking about the foster care system, right? So they're talking about different programs that are going there. Areas of concern among practitioners in a field. So are there particular areas that maybe laws or barriers or boundaries? Difficulties faced by specific groups of people in a society, a disparity, a lack, a injustice, if you will. Is there any, so if you think yours falls within this, keep it in your back pocket. Let's look at theoretical. And if we think about it, practical, this can be solved. Theoretical, oftentimes, because of the value, the belief system, and the ideologies which serve that theory, make it rather difficult and make it more of a moral or ethical issue when applying some kind of practical treatment to the issue. So theoretical research focuses on expanding in knowledge and understanding rather than directly contributing to the change. In theory, right, what could? So if any of you also have these concepts of something that may potentially happen in the future, or maybe going on, here could be an idea. A phenomenon or context that has been studied closely. So what is like a phenomenon? Something like sexual assaults in college campuses, this idea of like a racism, a concept of gender inequity, a pay gap, right? These are areas where oftentimes this philosophy or the theoretical or what has been going on within our systemic issues for life is what's impacting it. So is there a contradiction between perspectives, a situation or a relationship that is not well understood, a troubling question that has yet to be resolved, right? This idea of like maybe stem cell use or perchance gene editing could be an idea about this. Theoretical problems often have practical consequences, but they are not focused on solving an immediate issue in an immediate place. And that is really a way that you can tell the difference, is that is there an issue that in fact is taking place, and I can put something that practical consequences, I am seeing like the numbers happening all the time. So do you think you have a practical or a theoretical? How many of us think we have practical? What are you treating?
Sorry.
What are you going to treat? Why do you think you have a practical one?
it just falls into the criteria. Like, because for theoretical, it says like a contradiction between two or more perspectives. I don't feel like it.
Oh, sure, it
It's
could be,
fine.
that could be one of it, it doesn't have to follow all the criteria.
Oh,
Right, like a theoretical, it may be a contradiction, so like, that we, i.e., abortion, or human life begins at conception or a heartbeat, right? Like these ideas that we're kind of going back and forth, or that, the idea of a good or a bad or something. Let us take a second, let's take a step. Also, Jack, take a step. Think about it in this way. Here's the deal of what you are going to do to put a practical treatment. And I'm going to give you a practical treatment for both practical and theoretical, and that may help us identify a bit more as well. You are only going to go through 2 steps for an informative speech. We are going to wait on the setting aims and objectives for persuasion. So only doing these first 2. You're going to contextualize, and you're going to show why it matters. So the first thing that we're going to do is we want to contextualize our topic. And I always say this, but what does that really mean? Well, the problem statement that you're writing is going to frame for your audience the issue in its specific context. Because you're not talking about the issue in general, you're talking about it in terms of this particular area. And so we can know about the broader issue, but it's important to start narrowing in on specifically how we will be addressing that issue. So what context does it exist within? And also gives us some background on what is known about it. Keeping those 2 things in mind, if we start to look at practical research problems, and if we were looking at contextualizing it, you can focus on asking these questions and writing this down. Where and when does the problem arise? How is it occurring? Where is it occurring? Who is the problem affecting? And what attempts are already being made or going into this issue? Because, and we're only saying, you don't need to necessarily lay them out, but for example, if I am saying that over the past, Alex, yours would be a good one for this, and although your entire speech is doing that, let's say you were just talking about one particular law, because he's talking about immigration, and he's talking about specific laws that have impacted individuals at the border, that special interest groups, politicians, law, individuals have been at the border for how many years? We've gone through this many things, and the issue is that these individuals are still being separated and they are in poor conditions. So situating it that it has been going on, because many people also are like, well, haven't we fixed that already? Isn't that done? It's like gender equity. Yeah, I know, we have the Equal Pay Act. Isn't that done? No, it's not. Why? Well, because there's some other things that are existing, right? Practically, people weren't being paid. So how can we get them paid the same? Oh, let's show transparency and let's do that. Let's get them paid. But theoretically, it's really not there. So if we see something here, if we are talking about voter turnout in Region X has been decreasing steadily over the past 10 years, in contrast to other areas in the country. According to surveys conducted by organization-wide, turnout is lowest among under 25s and people on low incomes. There have been some effective attempts at engaging these groups in other regions, and in the last 2 election parties, A and B increased their campaign efforts in Region X. But these interventions have yet to have any significant effect on turnout. Right? So what can we do? If we're looking at these particular questions, do each of you think that you would be able to start to contextualize your particular topic? For your reveal topic portion of the speech, like, okay, well now let me tell you what this topic actually is and what's going on with it. Okay. In contrast, we have theoretical. So for theoretical research, think about scientific, social, geographic, and our historical background if you want to do. So we want to start to focus about, sure, again, what's already known about the problem. Is the problem limited to a certain time period or geographical area. This may be a key thing for you to note and to start to identify. And then how has the problem been defined and debated in the scope of literature or perchance in the debate of that issue? So what are the themes that are emerging, or what is the reasoning as to why something is not being resolved, or why that issue is there? So in the past 10 years, the gig economy has become an increasingly important sector of the labor market. Under 30s are more likely to engage in freelance, contracted, or zero-hour work arrangements instead of traditional full-time jobs. Research on the reasons for and consequences of this shift is focused on objective measures of income, working hours, and employment conditions. But there's been little work exploring young people's subjective experiences of the gig economy. So we're starting to look at like what is their, yes, this is the previous research that's been done, and this is what's continuously being looked at, but we've yet to in fact start to recognize the connection between these two things. And that's an important area that they're going to look at. What is the philosophy, or what is the perspective of these individuals that they want to take on a gig? Gig economy is so fascinating. And then I figured I always think I'm not in a gig economy, but I'm like, wait, I really am kind of a gig economy. You know what a gig economy is? I mean, this idea that you, if you think about it, I know that it's like $5 under, whatever, but it wouldn't be where you necessarily got a full-time job. Instead, you go from gig to gig. Not necessarily, you could do it like a freelance or a consultant, but often if you think about gig economy in the terms of also low-income work, think about how you can make a living and earn extra money being an Uber driver. It's a gig on top of your other thing, right? It's interesting. Like if you have a bunch of artist friends and they just kind of hustle work on that, like, yeah, they totally survive. Just get gigs here and there. It's interesting. Anyhow. Do each of you think you can start to put in some practical treatment? The most important thing that each of us are simply doing is getting in our historical context, our political context, our social context. Where does this exist? What's going on? What's the state of it? And what are you specifically going to look at? That's what our first part of contextualizing is. But the next part, which talks about showing why it matters to an audience, is going to be the next part that I'll talk about on your packet again. The next step here is something that's called a credibility statement. Credibility statement is also what our friend Aristotle, or referred to as credibility that an individual has, something called ethos. Ethos, yes, a modern day word for credibility, but it was really broken down very much for each of you in something like a good person speaking well. How was credibility broken down in a good person speaking well? Well, we had this idea of the good, speaking for the good, and we also had the idea of speaking well, meaning that we were both educated on a topic and we had the, what it means to be good?
Proper moral compass, I guess.
A proper moral compass, good. But remember, that's hard to say that each person's going to have the same proper moral compass. So what did we land on with this idea of good? That when we speak Plato, we speak only if we are an expert on something. I mean, that's what Plato was saying. We know about it. You have to know about it. And then for the best interest of the audience and society. Plato was so concerned about the power of rhetoric and the ability to promote ideals through communication to masses of individuals of whom do not maybe have the same knowledge that you do. He knew that that had potential harm with it. That if an individual did not know what they were speaking about and they placed that knowledge out into the world, that it could be very detrimental to not only the individual of whom they were speaking about, but also the society as a whole. We know how when individuals in courtrooms speak without truth, and they speak for the purpose of winning, and laws are decided because of that, it sets a precedent that is disastrous for an entire society. We know that every single time an advertiser puts out another advertisement to remind women how they are not good enough, it has a serious and verifiable consequence to their well-being. Every time you say something, it has the possibility to make an impact. So with this idea of speaking for the good, it is speaking with the best intention for the individual and the audience of what we are trying to talk about. The two parts of our ethos are based on this same thing. I just simply break it down in a different way. We look first at something called competence. What is competence? What does it mean that somebody's competent? Each of you are working on your competence in this class. You're working on your competence in your particular major. It's your, feel free to use a synonym, yeah?
Competence, I believe, is basically how well, like, almost like if you're trained in something, it's how well you can do something. If you're competent, then you feel trustworthy, someone can just do it. If you're incompetent, then you're probably going to do the thing wrong. And so you need someone to be like, hey.
I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to hire somebody to install a fan in my bedroom who, if they don't know or they don't have training in installing electricity or, right, like any of those things. Absolutely. It is your knowledge. It is your experience. It is your expertise. It means that you are capable to an audience to be speaking about this topic. We communicate our competence both explicitly and implicitly throughout our speech, but in your introduction, we're explicitly going to talk about it. In any other speaking event, you will more than likely be like, oh, everybody, we have a great speaker for you today. His name is Ed. He comes all the way to us from the UK, where he has practiced rugby for the past 40 years. He's taught kids on the ground. He's taught professional leagues. He has his own book, and he is the master of the website Rugby for Rulers. Everybody, here he is to talk to you today about strengthen your shoulder. Ed, right? So by the time Ed comes in and starts speaking about rugby, nobody's like, who the f is this person talking to me about rugby? You are going to be talking about these very big topics. And at this point in our career, if you were to come and talk about this topic in a different environment, more than likely individuals would be assuming what?
You're well versed in the topic.
I'd hope so, but if they don't know you, and you come in and you start your speech, before you start speaking, what do they know about you? Nothing. And that's the big deal, is that credibility exists well beyond even the scope of the classroom. There are three parts of credibility. There's initial credibility, derived credibility, terminal credibility. Initial credibility is the credibility at the beginning of a presentation. Typically, it is the credibility that is held in the in the minds of who? The audience, absolutely. So credibility is whether the audience deems an individual is competent, reliable, or knowledgeable about a topic. I already know I'm competent and credible, but my job isn't to convince myself. It's to convince my audience. Individuals are more likely to listen if they believe that you know what you're talking about, if they're an expert on it. Otherwise, what is the reason for me listening? Nobody is going to be able to give you a shout out when you come up into this room. And for a long time, you may not have somebody introducing you. So for the time being, this credibility statement is the opportunity for you to communicate that competence and for you to illustrate how you in fact know what you know, so that an audience who is seeing a college student get up and give this big topic that they should be buying into, that it has some kind of depth perspective behind it, because that's it, is that they don't know you. Like, who's this individual? Oh, he's in his first year of college? Okay, so let's hear what is this expertise? What do you know? How do you know about all this detail or information? We want to know what that is so we can believe, so we can buy into it. The other part that you will start to know here is something called character. So there are two pieces, C-H-A-R-A-C-T-E-R, that are incorporated. First is competence, then is character. What does it mean to have good character? When somebody who has character qualities. Character is, like, what is character? You ever hear like a character award when you were younger? I feel like they give those a lot in like elementary school. Or on sports teams. Feel free to look at the Lion Code. It talks a little bit about like your character.
You mean like your personality?
Could be like your personality, absolutely. Oh my gosh, look at him, so fun, so engaging, so cool. But, does your audience want to know if you're cool?
Like, if you're trustworthy?
There we go, so yes, and I like that I put trustworthy to do, right? But it's true, it's trustworthy, absolutely. Character is the good will and intent you have toward your topic and audience. Goodwill is that creepy feeling, or when goodwill is not there, it's that creepy feeling you get from a sales associate. It's that idea that you know they are not selling this to you for you. They are selling it for who? Themselves. When you're like, you're trying to get a commission, you're trying to make a profit, you're trying to get me to buy this. I don't know if you actually even believe in this product. Individuals that I feel oftentimes do this are people in kiosks in the middle of the mall. You ever been in the middle of the mall? Kiosk people? Oh my gosh, right. Oh jeez, these bags in your eyes are so terrible. I can totally help you fix that hair. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. You're not coming at me the right way to begin with. But this goodwill and the trustworthiness. So what is it that they're trustworthy? This is where we look at that honesty, that we have the best interest, A-N-T-R-E-S-T, of our audience in mind. So if you see this competence, sure, that we are the good person speaking well, but also that we have that character and that intention. It's not only important for us to have it as individual speakers so that we can go and produce good in the world, but also our audience needs to know that we are one of those people. You don't oftentimes hear a politician coming straight out and running for their candidacy by expressing their need and their desire to do things for themselves. It's in turn about doing something for somebody else. So let me talk to you about how to build in the idea of competence. You are going to need to explicitly tell your audience how you know what you know. Often, competence is seen through things like work experience, a certificate, maybe a degree of some sort. Maybe you have some kind of practical experience, like a family member is related to the issue. So how do you know what you know? What have you been doing in order to become a competent individual to reproduce this information for us? And in turn, we are also going to need to explicitly talk about the character. But with your competence, what in the world do y'all know? What is your experience? What's your expertise? What have you been doing?
Just pilot research.
Well, you know what I haven't been doing about your topic for the past 10 weeks, Clay?
Pilot research.
That's for darn sure. So, you have research. You're doing something. Let's hold on to that. So, research. I've been researching for the past 10 weeks. Fantastic. At the beginning of the semester, you filled out a research exploration worksheet. One of the questions on the research exploration worksheet asked you, why did you choose this topic? What makes you interested in this topic? One of the ways I believe an easy addition to the concept of research as your competence is to lead in with how you got interested in that topic. So what was it? Did you watch a documentary? Did you take a class last semester? Do you have a personal experience with somebody? Did you simply come across a statistic one day and say, that is shocking, I did not know that happened, I have to know more? What was it that got you? Based upon that, after taking a human sexuality class last semester and coming to find that blank occurs, I have indulged my passion by starting to explore blah, 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 blah through blank weeks of research, interviewing individuals in the field, and trying to discover the reasoning behind whatever. So you can simply start to talk about what you have done, what drew you there, and what led you there. And when we start to see the passion or the interest above something that may not be deemed as, oh my gosh, well, they're a total expert. Something like, I am a student who is just getting off the ground and I'm researching this topic to get my head in the game, that the interest and the desire can come there. Because it is also going to very easily speak to something like your character. It's going to allow you to talk about how you got into this, not because you want to make more money or you want to do whatever, but it's for the purpose of the greater what? Good. And that's where we get into this idea of character. So when we come back to the attention getter, and I'm talking to things about relating it to your audience or perchance suggesting the importance. Here, with this, why is it important to look at that, is not only addressed in the why it matters step, but it also allows you to accomplish that credibility statement with the character portion. This is where each of you as rhetorical art students, and let me simply put this down, and we start to see here. So why is it important that this problem, and for you, is looked at? Why is it important that we are continuously looking at this problem, or that we are addressing it? What are the stakes at hand if we don't start to look at something, right? Not that we need to solve it, not that it's bad, not that it's good, but yes, it's an issue and it's going on and we're identifying it in the world, and why is it important? That is a wonderful way to not only relate it to your audience, if you can, this is important in our world and this is how we're seeing it around us, it has a great impact on humanity, right? But a key way for rhetorical art students to address the focus of showing, right, is through the lens of social justice. You all have an issue where injustice is taking place. That is what you can talk about with this character. It shows that you are aware of the injustices and the imbalance, and that addressing that is the value and the betterment that you want for society and for the world at large. And so by bringing it back to that, what is the injustice, and then drawing to your purpose, you can, so like it says, try to walk us through how your topic is an injustice to the marginalized group that you're talking about, and potentially within the greater society at large, your specific audience. And now we've accomplished doing the relating and the importance within our presentation. Is this making sense? Okay. So when you're thinking through why it matters, go back, and if you can communicate this even in a couple sentences is fantastic. But really, consider what the injustice is and what, if that continues to go on, why it's important or what's happening or why we need to identify it and look at it. And then also think about the society as a whole and a little bit greater. So again, here are some ways that you can show why it's important. So if you're looking at questions to ask yourself for the show, for practical research questions, what will happen if it's not solved? Who will feel the consequences? Does the problem have a wider issue, right? Practical research. And then the same thing for theoretical. You can look through these and look again at the example. But by condensing or answering these questions, you should be able to address both B and C of your introduction. And we'll come back to those aims and objectives, but remember that PowerPoint is available to you on Brightspace, and it's also in that packet. So like I said, this fluidity is going to be up to you. Once you establish your attention getter, do I want to then talk about like the topic as a whole, and then maybe I want to give a little bit of legal perspective, and then we say, okay, well, here's what's been going on. It is really going to depend up to you and that criteria and how you want to articulate it. But hopefully those questions can help guide you, and when you start to answer those questions, it will start to formulate the reveal topic portion to put a contextualized background and also establish not only your own competence, but in turn implicitly and explicitly communicate that character and that desire to do well for the audience. The last thing you will do is you will not read it. Don't you dare read that thesis. Nobody read their thesis. If you have to read your thesis in this speech at this time. So we're going to deliver that speech to us, but also you're going to deliver us that thesis as if we're in front of you. You're not going to come up here and say, to persuade my audience. No, that would be very weird. Today, I'd like to inform each of you about right? That's what brings me here for this speech, to inform you all about blah. So how can we draw and then get to that thesis statement? And that'll be the last thing that you give in your introduction. But by doing this, we can contextualize, give a historical perspective, situate ourselves as credible, remind our audience that we are out there for the good, and get them interested and excited, and lay out all of our ideas in a very effective way. When you practiced your speeches out loud with your friends last time, we didn't really talk about how that went, talking about it. Do you recall when you talked about it? I talked about it with you a little bit, Jackie. Because was anybody else having difficulty reading their speech? Did any of you start to listen to it and think, this sounds weird? Or this sounds boring? Or this sounds redundant? Often with speaking, remember, you can start to realize what is going to work and what is not going to work by simply saying it out loud. Write as you would speak. So if you can go back through and write how you would speak it, that is going to make everything so much more fluid for you. So before you begin to write, remember, how would I say this to somebody? Continuously work on that and write your outline in that same pattern, because it's going to be the natural way you speak and it's going to fluidly work for you. And that's why I wanted you to practice it out loud, so you can start to find or hear where things are disjointed or discombobulated. The last thing that I mentioned, and this is for, in really in all honesty, this was about yours, because when you said this, I feel like this is boring. That's where we go back to tone. So here's the deal. Your topic, for example, and if you don't, can I say it out loud? Yeah. So Ed is talking about that there are specific barriers to the election process for Congress, right? And it's because of things like gerrymandering and incumbency, etc. Right? And so he's going down, talking about what gerrymandering is, and this is what happens, and this is how it impacts minorities. But the deal is, are the stakes of a gerrymandering speech as difficult to get through as, let's say, something like something like an abuse or something. No, the stakes are still high, but the way that you present that information to us at this point can become very light. And in all honesty, if you wanted to take it like you ever watch those, who's that guy, like Somebody Knows Best, what's that show, where he like proves everything wrong, not knows, or he ruins it for everyone, what is it?
Oh, Adam Ruins It.
Adam Ruins Everything. You ever see Adam Ruins Everything? To see the way that he talks about something? In that same regard, and not that it's satirical in any way, but there could be a fun way to present it in a teaching manner. Or you can think about it even in a very narrowed focus. Like if we're talking about gerrymandering, and if you wanted to explain that to your college students, how could you maybe even make an analogy? Or could we use some kinds of funny visual aids to lighten it up a bit when you're delivering it? You're like, so this is gerrymandering, right? And of course the impact and the importance of how it's going to impact those minorities is relevant. But in order for us to understand the ridiculousness and the atrocity and how they're trying to get away with saying like, oh no, we're not doing it, you can make that very satirical. Because we were talking about showing the lines of the district, right? And that's why I was saying, maybe show it and be like, so they say they're not doing it, but I don't know, what do these lines look, right? So if this was the vote that we were doing, and these are where the Latino environment was, and then they decided to draw it just like that, because it had to do with them 2 weeks before, I don't know, what do you think? Clearly this can have an impact right over. So, just something to put in your back pocket, y'all. Yours is the same way. We are nervous about these kids, but the fun part is that all of us have gone through it too, and you can make that. Like, you know how it is, you know how, oh boy, and here comes out of the, you been in on that one too? Yes, so am I, right? So it's that conversational style if you want it. Y'all, do you think you can go and write that introduction? Do you think you can work on that problem statement and contextualize? I think you all are rad. Remember, I am around if you need me over the break. If you want to leave me with something, because you're writing it, absolutely. Let me give that forward. And then note that I'll be around and you just contact me. But otherwise, be safe. Keep yourself healthy if you can. Rest your bodies. Don't take drinks from strangers. And don't do drugs. Okay, what?
Avoid coronavirus.
All right, how do we do that again? I mean, there's a lot of ways. Oh, man.
I hope I'm back.